icon. We'll unmute for you and you pose your question. Alternatively, you could write your question and we could present it to the speaker for you.
Good afternoon, Kelisha Williams, Television Jamaica. My question is in regards to just a response from the government saying that the members who were a part of the committee did not represent well and only attended a few meetings. That's coming from Kavan Gale in terms of the Joint Select Committee, the meeting. If this is true, can you say why the members only attended a few meetings and whether these same concerns were raised at that time? Thank you.
I won't even dignify that with a response because for one, there is a report on the attendance of all the members that were there. And that approach, you can review that attendance review. However, even if Senator Gale was correct, they're suggesting that the PNP is the only competent individuals that exist because their presence did not correct these maladies. So if it is that the PNP members was quote unquote absent, for which we know JLP members that went to 5 out of 45 meetings, right? So if it is that our absence led to this negative, then it is right that the people consider that we should be the government because we will make the decisions that are likely to benefit the people. And additionally, there is no justice in his suggestion because the teachers were not absent. This is not a bill, PNP bill. This is a JTC bill. And so therefore, what we're proposing are reasonable to be considered because there's risk attached to the teachers who were not invited to be members. They were present in their periods of invite, and they made many of these recommendations that were ignored. So an excuse such as that is not one that is sufficient for us to delay the conversation on. So he should speak to the capacity of his persons who were present to not have seen the things that our entire team immediately saw.
Morning, Senator Crawford. Mahiri Stewart from Nationwide News here. Adding on to what you just said a while ago, are there any groups out there that you think, well, okay, let me rephrase the question. Are there any groups that weren't consulted for this bill that you think if they were, would have led to there not being some of the inconsistencies you've identified?
I think that consulted and considered is two different things. The government seek to believe that if they spoke to you, even without acknowledging your statements, that is consultation. The Jamaica Teachers Association have made many recommendations that were not considered. But it can't be stated that they weren't consulted because they spoke to the person. So if I come to you and ask you, what would you want for dinner? Yet anything you say is not considered, then that is not legitimate to say you were considered, even though you were consulted. So I believe that if the Teachers Association had greater consideration, if the Principals Association had greater consideration, if we were not in a mad haste to say the government is performing before elections. Because, I mean, why is it that this must come true now? What is the reason why we can't review? Because there's precedent. When they made the stupid transportation bill that was asking for a child seat in a taxi, when the public saw the fallacy of that, which we highlighted in the Senate as well, they then made amendments. So there's precedent that now that we have shown them the folly of their ways, that there's reasonable risk to teachers, that there's reasonable probability that it may have unintended consequences. We believe that at this time they should reopen the conversation, and more persons are consuming the bill. Unfortunately, many did not read it before now. Unfortunately, many did not participate before now. But the intent of the bill is for national progress, not for a completion record for the government to say we have done 10 things in the midst of an election.
Good afternoon, Sashana Small from the Gleaner. Well, you kind of went ahead of my question just now in terms of, do you think that the government, we've been talking about this bill for over 2 decades,
yes,
right? Do you think that we were just trying to push it through with haste at this
yes.
point? And also, just to clarify something that you said earlier, because I've been listening to the conversation about the bill, and the proponents are saying that this bill, it is supposed to push our country forward. We're
Yes.
supposed to have more accountability in the sector. And also it does in fact reflect the realities of our education system. What is your response to
I'm
that?
sorry, I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Do you think the bill reflects the realities of our education system as it stands?
No, definitely not. I believe that the desire to play a game that many children used to enjoy called Who Stole the Cookie from the Cookie Jar. And that game was a game to pass blame to anybody that was left in the game. So the government having failed so dramatically to the point that 13,000 of our children have not been competent in mathematics. So that continuously only 18%, which suggests 82%, is not passing the necessary 5 subjects, including math and English, is seeking to sell a narrative to the uninformed that it is not systematic problems within the education system, but a teacher problem that can be immediately corrected. And that is not true. If it was a teacher problem of competence, then why is Dubai here recruiting our teachers? Why is Canada here, UK here recruiting our teachers? It is a reality of resources being lacking. Any individual can go to a rural school and recognize that we still have chalkboards dividing classrooms. Any individual can do that. Any individual can ask a 11th grader if they have received their math books from government on rental. Any individual can recognize that there's no reasonable nutritional profile that is set for what a school lunch should include, even if the government is funding it. The government's contribution to the PATH program lunch is $180 per day. $180. That cannot provide nutrition. There is no commensurate activity to make sure parents are involved, to ensure that fathers in particular remain participatory, that women have the opportunity to fund the cost of education for their children. The government continue to sell the untruthful narrative that you don't have to pay school fees. And the schools that perform the best have parents who are willing to pay school fees. Have the government therefore contributed that cost to the schools? The school's contribution is $17,000 per child for 190 days. If you should do that mathematics, that ends up to about what? 17,000 divided by 100, that is going to be less than $100. Less than $100. 17,000 divided by 10 is 1,700. Divided by 10 is 170. Divided by 2, that is about $85. So it's about $89 per day. How can $89 per day effectively teach a child? There has been no increase since 2016 to that budget. There's a transformation plan that is on board that was put forward by the government to be the answer. It hasn't been tabled in Parliament, and it hasn't been funded. They don't want us to recognize that the World Bank suggested that education loss needed $4 billion, and they corrected it with $1 billion. They are now trying to blame the teachers for the 11-year-old we see at the stoplight wiping glass on a Monday at 10 a.m. All of those realities are being ignored, and this bill don't correct those realities. That we don't have proper transportation, that if rain is falling, a rural person will not go to school because there's no bus stop. All of those realities are trying to be hidden in this election season by forcing forward, oh, we're fixing education through the JTC bill. We believe that the bill can contribute to a pillar, but there are many other pillars still being ignored, and that is what we want to correct. So we believe it is a haste, in the same way we see with the roads, to suggest activity at this particular point in time.
Yeah. Second question. In light of
Nine-
the...
Not 89. I can teach maths if I
Yeah. Next question. In light of the issues that have been raised by everyone standing here so far, would it be safe to say that the PNP is labeling this bill, at least in its current state, as a failure?
No, the PNP is guaranteeing that we will make these changes when we get power. And so what we're seeking to inform our teachers is never forget which party started by teachers. Never forget which party has been committed to education. Never forget which party has moved tertiary access from 6% to 22%. Never forget which parties did free education at all levels. And never forget that these are the things we're putting forward. So what we are saying is we will make these corrections if we should get power. And we're suggesting to our government, if they have any interest in the teachers, that they make those corrections now. Don't delay us to have to do what we have highlighted for them to do at this point in time. So we're not speaking to the bill, we're speaking to the outcomes, and the outcomes are risky to our teachers.
There is a question here online. Is the PNP aware of any updates on the unrest among teachers due to delayed salaries? And would the PNP support protest actions by the teachers if the act is not repealed?
We're not aware of any further information. We know that the government made a commitment to the representatives of the teachers through the JTA, and we beg the teachers not to be ignited to splinter group representation through the JTA. The power of the teachers in our society has been maintained by their willingness to act together. And there are some within the society seeking to splinter that by telling teachers to step away from the JTA that acts as their representative. Would we support protest action? It depends. We won't support disruption of our society. We know that our children are facing CXC now, and we hope that our teachers may delay, but we understand the teachers' desire for their reasonable remuneration, and they can't carry what they are calling a Benz bill and paying teachers with the pro-box salary. So we understand that reality that our teachers are facing. However, because it's exam time, we would prefer if our teachers bite this bullet and support the students at this particular point in time. But if they feel that they can't bear it anymore, it is for them to decide how they would act.
We have another question on the floor.
And from Television Jamaica. Just last week I did a story in regards to some schools which are losing students, especially boys. And oftentimes you see them being recruited by gangs. And I also understand in other parishes too, a lot of students are missing from the system, especially boys. They're not returning to school and they end up falling, victim to some of these crimes. What is the opposition's position on this in terms of should you form the next government? How do you ensure that these students stay in school and you're able to track them down?
We have a fulsome plan. I don't know if you will make news time if we should give the fulsome plan, but let us just give some tenets of that. For one, many of our children are finding it difficult through transportation costs and transportation systems. I mentioned my own constituency of Ty Dixon, which is a rural community depending on farming. That reality that these persons are not transitioning from point A to point B cause for many taxis not to find it viable to ply that route. Therefore, the children who have to move from point A to point B, though the adults just go to them farm and go to them land, is having difficulty sometimes having to go through St. Anne to get back to St. Catherine for Charlemont High School. So what we have proposed in the budget through Mark Golding, Julian Robinson, and others is that we would give $2,500 per week to needy students who are having difficulty getting to school based on the cost of transportation in these rural spaces. Secondly, we have indicated that all needy students, for which we have budgeted 56% of Jamaican students are in need, will receive a lunch at the value of $400. The government's current cost is $180. And even when the Minister of Finance did her mathematics, she was 1 billion short in her own mathematics. So therefore, the students would find that to be a problem moving forward. So we have said that the 56% will receive a meal of $400 for each day for the 190 days. One of the reasons why our boys are being taken out is because they are the ones who are going to be asked to work, because physical labor is more easy to get for boys because they're more physically disposed, more physically able, and so they're being asked. We're also going to be targeting absenteeism. The Prime Minister, unfortunately, himself misunderstands absenteeism and calls it truancy. Truancy is when the child was sent to school and chose not to go. Absenteeism is when the entire collective, the parent, decided not to send him. there is a major problem with absenteeism for which we would ensure that we target. So we have a full something about student motivation. We have a full something about access to your books. And understand this, the cumulative nature of education, which suggests, for example, if I would be allowed to teach under this bill continuously, I would teach factorization on Tuesday so as to teach quadratic equation on Thursday. Quadratic equation is dependent on the understanding of factorization. The student absent on Tuesday become annoyed and perceive incompetence on Thursday because he has no prior information about the Tuesday lesson. So even though the absenteeism is 22%, the cumulative impact will make it seem as if it is 76% because the person haven't, and so therefore that depression with that system has caused for many of our students to remain absent. We have been teaching, we have over 100 years of teaching right here. And that experience is what we would use to make 20 years. And I'm gone 27, 31. Yeah, I've been teaching since a while. 19, I'm gone 25. Enough, I'm gone, but it's many years here. And many levels of teaching. And that is why we are able to understand the nuances of the profession, understand the realities of the children, understand the vagaries facing the parents. And this is how we are going to do. This bill discourages some of our plans. This bill discourages our ability to extend the school day by having persons facilitate homework classes so that this boy don't go home at 2 o'clock without an adult until 7. This bill negates my ability to do that. This bill negates my ability to introduce into the schools persons for social development through Cadet Corps and Girls Guide who are not professional teachers. That's why we're so concerned, because we're confident of victory and we want to be able to do quickly the things that are necessary to do.
Thank you very much, Senator Crawford. We want to say thank you to all of our educators who came this morning to stand up for their colleagues and for the students. We want to thank the members of the media and those watching us online on the PNP.
The government's willingness to distort conversations to suggest things are impossible that are already happening will indicate that the Early Childhood Commission has a professional development activity on the 19th to the 23rd of May, for which the cost is $20,000 and $15,000 if you're an early bird. That is only one of possibly many hours that you would have to face for professional development. So as we are speaking, there is indeed this probability of cost. We're also wanting to make it clear that we are not against registration or regulation. What we are against is the approach. As have been indicated by our proposals, we are not against the licensing, the registration, or the renewal. However, we feel, if I may repeat, that we should merge registration and licensing into a single streamlined process. Extend the licensing period from 5 years to 10 years for stability. Introduce 6-month grace periods unless there is a reasonable cost to request another, and fund the Jamaica Teaching Council through direct government subvention, not teacher licensing fees. With 30,000 teachers, if the licensing fee is $20,000 per teacher, they would have taxed the teachers $600 million. If it is that this is so necessary, it should be funded by government and not by the teachers paying fees. We are not against continuous professional development. In fact, we're very much in support. As we have recommended, if I may repeat, mandate all required CPD courses to be free or fully subsidized, such as the example that I've given just a minute ago for our teachers. Grant CPD credit for in-service accomplishments such as mentoring, leadership, and school contributions. Create a national CPD portal that is accessible online and offline with rural access guarantees. Introduce a 6-month grace period so that difficulty can be considered for persons who have not completed CPD in cases of hardship or in cases of pregnancy. We go further, provide tangible incentives for CPD completion, such as increments for salary, promotion points, or public recognition. It is important that the public recognize a trend in the approach to the Jamaica Labour Party's efforts. We saw it when the PNP had to go for a constitutional challenge to NIDS, which was another big stick approach to any form of formalization. No carrots were mentioned. Overreach into homeschooling, volunteerism, and online education. Indeed, there are already systems in place to ensure that homeschooling have to go through certain hoops. Now, they are proposing that you can only teach your own child or you must be registered. I myself is at risk because volunteerism is now based on being ad hoc. I go every Saturday. Therefore, that is no longer ad hoc. So the private tutoring is at risk. And also, they have now policed online tutoring, but only for Jamaicans because they can't police overseas online tutoring, taking us out of the competitive space as it relates to that. A person who have a actuarial degree or a mathematics degree, but not a trained teacher, can't go online and work out the CXC past paper for persons who are trying to address. We're not against regulation, but we ask for Section 4 to be amended to clearly exempt community volunteers, such as Ms. Dassa up in a dying community who has taken on the responsibility of hosting students on our veranda for our veranda basic. Private tutors below a certain teaching threshold, and church and informal instructors. Introduce a volunteer class registration without fees or full regulation for non-profit, non-formal educators. Create separate regulatory categories for full-time professional teachers, private tutors, and informal educators. Protect parental rights and educational freedom by shielding homeschool groups and co-ops from criminalization. And also support educational innovation, ensuring that the law does not suppress community-based initiatives. Indeed, we are not against teachers being fit and proper, nor are we against teachers being competent to teach. However, we want these to be defined so that they can be cognizant of what fit and proper is before they face the music. Also, we hope that they understand fully what competent to teach is, as many teachers are fearful that this may be sneaking through the back door, performance pay. And there are some people who say, oh, it's the teacher's fault. I want to make a bet with any Jamaicans willing to take it up. Swap all the teachers from Campion to Holy Trinity, and swap all the teachers from Holy Trinity to Campion. And you tell me if Campion will become Holy Trinity, and Holy Trinity will become Campion. The reality is that that will definitely not be so. We want to require the council to issue written reasons to protect persons. We are not against regulation, but we are against the punitive nature of this bill. Establish a legal defense fund or provide state-sponsored legal aid for accused teachers. We have already seen this happening with the police when they face indicum. Even after they're cleared, they're punished with the cost of legal representation, sometimes up to millions of dollars, though they are cleared. So therefore, we want this legal defense fund to be set up. And if there's any fee, it should go directly to the legal defense fund. Guarantee the right to face and respond to one's accuser. Prohibit double jeopardy. Guarantee salary continuation while you are in the process of appeal. And implement a proportional penalty framework so that the cost of teaching without a license isn't almost 10 times the cost of driving without a license. Now, driving without a license must have greater hazardous and risk to the society than the risk of teaching. There is no proportionality. We're also saying that we want schools to remain flexible. This bill seems to have borrowed what happens in many more developed countries without considering our realities and our situation. I know in some areas in the United States, they have replacement teachers on call and substitutes and the region will send a substitute as soon as the principal requires. We don't have that situation. Indeed, we might have to ask the physics teacher to teach math for us. We have heard on many occasions, especially in the first few weeks of school, that schools are still having advertisement for multiple spaces because teachers have indicated resignation at the last moment. This doesn't fit our current realities in rural areas. This doesn't fit our current realities in dying communities. This doesn't fit our realities in dangerous communities, where this government have removed peril pay, which was an encouragement for persons to go into rural spaces, which was an encouragement for persons to go into violence-prone communities. That peril pay has been removed, and then in addition, this bill seeks to remove flexibility, causing for principals to face serious constraint. It was not until we recommended that principals had to be as leadership on the committee, on the council, that it was included as a probability for principals to be included. But a principal may not even know when someone is being investigated, and therefore only have information on the day that they are instructed that the person should no longer teach. What if that happens in May, right before CXC? What if that happens in April? The teacher then would have to start the process of trying to find replacement instead of having been informed and continuously been able to assess what the probability of the outcome could be. And so we're asking for those things to be included. And as my very able junior spokesperson have indicated, we would prefer a bill that makes the teachers want to sign on, not one that forces them to sign on. Because if you're going to force them to sign on with a big stick approach with big bosses watching, then you're only adding an inducement to find other pastures. And that inducement will do the opposite of what the bill claims that it intends. So again, we repeat, we're not against regulation. We are for a different approach that treats our teachers with trust. And as the teachers' party, we will continue to lobby for teachers to be treated right and correctly.
Thank you very much, Senator Damion Crawford. And